Exactly. Look, it was a pretty interesting weekend of sport on and off the field. Completely overshadowed, I suspect, by the racism in the Spurs-Chelsea game. The warning went out after Rudiger told Azpilicueta, his captain, and Azpilicueta told the referee, and the warning went out. And it kind of, what happens subsequently is largely overshadowed by the debate in the Sky studio, where Gary Neville points out that racism exists in the highest office in the land in the UK. Now, he was very smart about how he talked about it, because he talked about both parties. He talked about, obviously, there were allegations of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn across the course of the campaign. And by talking about both of them, he gave Sky cover, because he was immediately saying, this is a problem which afflicts everybody.
And he also said, when he was speaking about the two political parties, that they have been accused of racist doctrine, as opposed to calling them racist, as opposed to making it very pointed and very specific.
Yeah, now there are very clear instances where Boris Johnson has used racist terms about people.
Yeah.
Miguel Delaney has a brilliant piece today, which I urge everybody to read. It's either carried in the Indo or the...
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's from the London Independent. And he just points out that Johnson has used racist terms in the past, and it's, you know, there's no... You can't dress that up. But what Gary Neville did was talk about both of those. And obviously the Dave Jones, the Sky presenter, comes in and then says, whatever the phraseology he was, I'm compelled
the views
to
of
point
Gary
out
Neville, not Sky Sports.
And Gary Neville goes, well, do you not agree with them? And he says, well, you know, that's completely irrelevant whether or not I agree with them. I'm just here trying to have a balanced conversation about this. And like, everybody attacked him, because rightly, that is a flabby use of language. There is no balanced conversation about racist abuse. There isn't.
Yeah, there is a right and a wrong. Yeah. There's no middle ground.
Exactly.
There's no grey area.
Now, the difficulty, just momentarily, and this is largely irrelevant in the overall scheme of things, but I'm sure he had somebody in his ear when Neville was talking.
Well, there's no question he had.
It's hard to hear what somebody says exactly when somebody is talking to you at the same time. You should try it.
I imagine the message was not being delivered to him in the usual measured way a producer might deliver a message during a broadcast.
Well, maybe it's like, you got to get in here, you got to get in here, you got to get in here. And like, you know, not throwing the producer under the bus either, because the producer has his job to say, like, because if he's just said something about just Johnson or just Corbyn or whatever, then maybe there is a requirement to go, okay, we need to put the fact that there is another side to the story here.
Dave Jones has got a lot of abuse and criticism for that moment yesterday. I feel very sorry for him.
He apologised on Twitter last night, in fairness. Sky, as soon as he apologised, which was clearly a coordinated response, Sky retweeted his apology and said, Sky, abhor racism. So, like you know...
but as you say, that's just a minor aspect of what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just an additional add-on to the event of the afternoon.
It's not great when Gary Neville is the last person who you can turn to and say, right, come on, somebody needs to show some leadership here. Football needs a lot of leaders. Rudiger clearly was one yesterday. He came out very eloquently on Twitter, spoke about this and said, we need to continue talking about this, because this is going to be... Here, I'll read these for you then. From the bottom up, it's really sad to see racism again at a football match, but I think it's very important to talk about it in public. If not, it'll be forgotten again in a couple of days, as always. I don't want to involve Tottenham as an entire club into this situation, as I know that just a couple of idiots were the offenders. I got a lot of supportive messages on social media from Spurs fans as well in the last hours. Thank you a lot for this. I really hope the offenders will be found and punished soon, and in such a modern football ground like Tottenham Hotspur Stadium with dozens of TV and security cameras, it must be possible to find and subsequently punish them. If not, then there must have been witnesses in the stadium who saw and heard the incident. It's just such a shame that racism still exists in 2019. When will this nonsense stop? You know, we've all seen those fan pic, you know, the camera that takes a picture of every fan and you can scroll in and see your face, and I mean, it's not going to be that hard to find these people, I would assume. And again, the stadium is equipped with technology as Spurs Stadium. It's
blanketed in CCTV for security reasons, obviously. So you would think it will be possible to pick out the individual offenders. It's really depressing, and it's very hard to know what to do. Like, Antonio Rudiger has been incredibly measured in his comments there, and it is obviously not a Tottenham Hotspur thing, just as it was not a Manchester City thing when Fred was racially abused, just as it was not a Chelsea thing when Raheem Sterling was racially abused. These are individual idiots, and I think that's maybe the difference between. It's very easy to throw the Bulgarians and the Serbians and the Italians for the issues that they have with regard to racism under the bus, and then say if what happened yesterday in North London happened in, Sofia during an international, there would be uproar. Whereas because it's the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, we aren't as quick to point the finger. But there is a slight difference in that I've covered a lot of those international games, and there are hordes of people in the stands in unison doing it. And so for me, there is a bit of a difference there. That this was probably just one idiot, as was the case at the Etihad Stadium when Fred was taking that corner kick.
Yeah, but it's fair enough. It's one, but it's not an isolated case anymore. It's not one individual.
Oh no, it's like all too regular and all too common.
Exactly.
But what do you do? How do you? What is the next step that needs to be taken here?
Take them off the pitch. Invest in,
which should have been the protocol, as we understand it.
Invest in education around racism. Racism is learned. People learn racism from their parents and from the people around them, and it's taught, and it's used by politicians and political parties to grow their own power base. That's where racism comes from. Racism doesn't come from any of those crappy bullshit narratives that you get sold, right? So, like, if football, particularly the Premier League, which is not just a bunch of white English people playing football the way it was 35 years ago, it's now one of the most multicultural sports things in the world. It may well be the most multicultural sports tournament and competition in the world, where literally the best young footballers from every country aspire to play there. So there is an opportunity for the Premier League to stand up and say, hang on a second, we're going to be the world leaders when it comes to doing this. Every club is going to have to invest a couple of million for the local communities in making sure that there are outreach programs, pilot programs, and that we all at least begin the process of having a conversation. And we're not going to let it disappear. And we're certainly going to have a zero tolerance policy. And we're going to reward people who tell us that they've seen this and can point us in the exact direction of it. Like, they have to...
The Premier League are not the governing body in this regard, which I find very difficult to understand. And this is a point that Gary Neville made yesterday. Like, the FAA have opened an investigation. Where are the Premier League on this?
Well, I think
it's their league, it's their division, their clubs, their players, their TV rights. What is happening with the Premier League at the moment? And why is it down to the PFA, the FA, the police and the clubs in question?
I think all of those should be involved, and the Premier League need to be very strong. And this is their opportunity to do that now, where they're being called out and where they're being asked to do it properly. So,
and another worrying aspect of it for me is that I would think, and maybe some of our viewers and listeners can get onto us on this, that if I was at a game in Dublin or Kerry or anywhere in this country and a player from a minority background was being abused, that person would be outed on the terraces or in that stand, that there would be somebody in that area of the stand that would go to a steward or a member of An Garda Síochána and they would bring this to their attention.
I don't know if we're any better. I don't think we are.
Well, I haven't seen or heard it happen while I've been at a sporting event in this country, so I don't know what the reaction would have been. But it clearly is not the done thing over at these Premier League grounds, where if someone beside you is behaving this way, that you actually try and do something about it.
Yeah, so exactly. Self-policing has to improve. The fact that people think that they're going to either get away with it or that it's okay to do this in this large crowd.
They're empowered to do so. Exactly,
and they're empowered to do so by the current political discourse that has been completely led, I would argue, by the Tories in England over the last 4 or 5 years. Like, certainly they have adopted the clothes of Farage and his cronies, and again, I would urge you all to read Miguel Delaney today, but football is reaping what the rest of society is sowing, and he's making the point it's no longer good enough to just say football's a reflection of society. Football needs to change and to be an agent of change, and the Premier League has a vested interest in being an agent for change. And unfortunately, sometimes it comes down to what vested interests there are that are actually going to make a difference. To briefly go back to football, you were at the Man United Watford game.
Yeah.
What a weird league season we're having, where Watford can suddenly close the gap at the bottom of the table to make the bottom of the table fairly constricted again.
Yeah, I think is it 6 points now? They're adrift of fourth bottom. Nigel Pearson working his magic dust again.
The magic? Is it
Well,
his brutal hammer fist of...
Well, the result is magical from Watford supporters' point of view. Whatever about
Remember that time he fought the Wild Dogs?
whatever about the manner in which he's delivered it. But no, they were aided and abetted in a huge way yesterday. I don't want to detract from Watford's win because they were just so committed yesterday. From start to finish, guys like Will Hughes, for example, he had an enormous game yesterday afternoon. The two central defenders, Kabasele at the back in particular, Cathcart, they were phenomenal. Ben Foster made 5 or 6 really good saves in the last 10 minutes. They were brilliant and they deserved it. But the 2 goals it was kamikaze stuff from Manchester United's point of view. And they are now in a league season in which they've lost to West Ham, Bournemouth, Crystal Palace, Newcastle United and Watford. It's safe to say that if this was anyone else of any sort of a different background as regards the club and its history than Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he would not be in the job. It was an emotional appointment at the time, and it's now an emotional retention.
Is it though?
Are
you not like? Is the squad not so far away from?
I'm not arguing right now. I'm not arguing the point as to whether he should stay or whether he should be sacked.
Right.
I'm saying that if it wasn't him, he would be sacked by now. Because it's been a catastrophically bad season for them. They've won 6 of their 18 games.
It's 6 points against the bottom 7, and yet they've got 10 points against games in the top 4.
Yes, they've played Leicester, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham, Manchester City, Arsenal, if you want to throw in the
big clubs,
traditional big 6.
Yeah,
and they haven't lost any of those games.
Signs of progress there, Dave.
The stats yesterday are mind-boggling. We'll get into them with Kenny.
Yeah,
but the one that stood out the most for me is that they've, in the 17 games, the last 17 games in which they've enjoyed more of the ball than their opponents, they've won once. 1 in 17. Astonishing.
It's not great. We'll come back to that a little bit later on when we're talking with Kenny. Here is indeed what's coming up. So, show started at 7:30 for you this morning. It's 7:45 a.m. now. The sports pages are coming your way. Kenny Cunningham's going to join us around 8:05. We'll talk football with him. And then Christmas racing around about 8:35. Tom Ronogar is going to join us at 8:45. You can use the hashtag OTBM to tweet us this morning. And Tommy might send us out early. School might be getting out early this morning. Is that what happened, Tommy? I don't know. It is. Yeah, it is.
I heard rumours to that effect.
Oh, yeah. So we're finishing at 9. Can you believe it? Phoning it in today. What? I can't believe who made that decision. Let's get to the newspapers.
OTB AM.
Back page of the Star this morning. Sorry, I just got to bring it. I haven't noticed this before. Ireland's greatest newspaper, and it's got the little holly wreath beside it. I mean, Christmas time, a bit of sucker for a bit of holly beside it. If they say it's Ireland's greatest newspaper, it must be. So the back page here is a pool party on the beach. Alison wants Liverpool to create more history by landing the Premier League title after celebrating their first Club World Cup. They seem to be taking it seriously anyway. And stuffed, but Ole keeps faith after De Gea disaster. David De Gea getting a bit of an easy ride here?
I don't know.
What is
an easy ride from his manager, you mean? Perhaps.
Like,
but no manager is ever going to come out and really go after the player who's made the mistake.
Is De Gea all that?
Right now, he's not.
Has he been for a while?
Well, he had a very poor finish to last season. And
the one that they rewarded him with the biggest contract.
Well, it was felt at the time that the distraction that was his contract issue and the winding down of his contract and all of the speculation over his future was probably one of the causes of his drop in form. And that once they got the deal in place and that he committed his long-term future to the club, that he could get back to the player who was the best goalkeeper in the league and had won, 4 Player of the Season awards in a row at the club. But no player is responsible for more mistakes that have led to goals this season than he in the entire division. And yesterday was as bad a mistake as you would expect any goalkeeper to make at any level.
Yeah. So what, like, do you sell him now?
Well, his value is dropping.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get for him now what you might have got in the weeks after he signed his new contract, but I don't think you'd throw the baby out with the bathwater in this case. Like, David De Gea is still a brilliant goalkeeper, but those mistakes have to be cut out. You put that in with the mistake he made against Everton, albeit it was a foul and VAR should have ruled the goal out, but he was just not strong enough in that goal that led to the moment that led to the own goal off the knees of Victor Lindelof. And there was another couple of incidents in the game yesterday where Watford were clearly just lobbing that ball into the penalty area, knowing that he was weak. And
old school GA
he had eradicated that from his game to a large extent. It was a big issue for him when he originally joined Manchester United and was very young and he was starting to perform in the Premier League. He was slight and he was frail and maybe he wasn't mentally strong, but he definitely improved that aspect of his game as well as all the other brilliant qualities that he has as a goalkeeper. But that error yesterday, look, you or I would have saved it. It was a shocker, absolute shocker.
I probably wouldn't.
Well, you would have been able to stand there and keep your hands together. That's all that was required in that particular moment. I've got the front page of the Irish Times. Racism is most definitely interfering with the game on every level. You mentioned Miguel Delaney's piece that people should read this morning. Another very good piece on it from Barney Ronay. The abuse of Rudiger goes beyond a wretched day for Spurs. It goes to the very soul of football. And Solskjaer angry at United's lack of urgency. He accuses players of playing at testimonial pace in the first half yesterday. And if that is the case, why did that happen? You're the manager, it's happening on your watch.
Yeah, so there's always a bit of the difference between who's responsible. How responsible are players for not putting in the shift, and how responsible is the manager for not inspiring them to do that? Like, it's definitely the manager and the culture that sets the tone, but you need players who are self-starting. Like, why is Harry Maguire not a leader in that team? Why is Rashford and De Gea and all the rest of them who realise that this is their gig, not actually able to inspire the people around them to work harder, to set a tone?
I don't know. One of the players who has set the tone in recent weeks and has become a fixture in the starting 11 is Scott McTominay. His first half yesterday was the stuff of nightmares in terms of a ball distributing midfield player, and the quality of the first half yesterday from both teams, it's as bad as the Premier League can get. Neither side could string more than two passes together. Even the most simple of 10-yard passes were being given back to the opposition.
Yeah, okay, look, we'll get into that again with Kenny in a couple of minutes' time. The Irish Daily Mail, so I think they don't have the racism story on their back page. The worst yet, David's howler sees United hit a shocking low. David's. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer blasted Manchester United for playing with the intensity of testimonials. Their worst ever Premier League season reached another nadir yesterday. How did your county do? Sportsmail's hurling rankings for the season. And then Carberry set to make a comeback in Limerick. This is a Rory Keane story. Joey Carberry's on track to make his long-awaited comeback in next Saturday's interprovincial clash between Munster and Leinster in Thomond Park. Carberry travelled to the World Cup in Japan with an ankle injury and returned in a worse state. So that's in the Daily Mail in England. Spurs race storm. Rudiger complains of monkey chants, and Ole replayed like a testimonial.
The front page of the Examiner's sports supplement today. Gift wrapped, De Gea's howler helps Watford stun United. And there are a number of interesting reads in the Examiner this morning, but one of them is a piece with Paul Keane, by Paul Keane, with former Dublin footballer Shane Carthy, although he's 25 years old. He's described as a former Dublin footballer, but he has ambitions to turn that back into a current Dublin footballer. Darkness into Light, Dublin, Shane Carthy on battling depression. Really interesting piece on the road that he has travelled in dealing with mental illness and how much progress he's made. 90 different talks in 2019 Shane Carthy has given on mental health and battling depression. That is he's a busy man.
Pretty impressive. And did he talk about what the issues were, how he managed to climb out?
It's a common theme, Jerry. He eventually spoke to somebody about it, and he describes himself having been in a position where he couldn't even tell members of his family about what he was going through, and now he's standing up in front of 1,200 people and specifically laying out exactly what he was going through. So it's been quite a step up for him in that regard, and now he just wants to get back to showing that he's good enough to be part of Desi Farrell's plans with Dublin, who would have managed him at under 21 level.
The Racing Post, the front cover this morning. McCoy, don't doubt surname stamina for King George. So Tony McCoy has urged Harry Cobden not to repeat the mistake he once made as the greatest ever jumps jockey declared surname is Ladbrokes King George the 6th chase pick, but stressed the sport's top performer must be ridden as though his stamina is guaranteed. So it's basically a preview of Kempton on Stephen's Day.
Back at the Irish Independent, this is Britain in 2020. This is football in 2022. That's Miguel Delaney and Paul Hayward's piece. Investigation launched into alleged racist chants directed at Rudiger by Tottenham crowd during Chelsea victory. And there's a piece by Eamon Sweeney in the Indo today. Solskjaer simply too nice to be the Manchester United manager. Also a mention of that piece with Shane Carthy as well, that's in the Independent as well this morning.
I missed the whole Pogba. Gary Neville also said that he's lying about Pogba, that Solskjaer hasn't been completely honest.
I missed that as well. What was
it's the sense
referencing?
That he needs to get rid of him, that he actually wants to get rid of him.
So when he says the club have no intention of selling, that
actually
not being
he's
truthful.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose if you have any intention of selling, you tell everybody that you've no intention of selling.
Exactly, isn't that it?
But to accuse him of being dishonest in that regard, he's just playing the game.
I think Solskjaer's playing a clever game right now, or he desperately wants him to stay. If he came out and said, no, Pogba does not have a future here, then it would depreciate the price heavily. So I think he's saying Pogba has a future here, but I can't believe there isn't something going on behind the scenes, especially when you hear the agent's comments this week. That was what he said. Pogba came off the bench. What was that like?
He was good.
Was he?
Yeah. Himself and Mata came off the bench in quick succession and they changed the game. Not to the point where United actually scored, but that was more down to poor finishing and good goalkeeping from Ben Foster. But their ability to create definitely improved markedly after Pogba was brought in. He played in a couple of brilliant balls into the penalty area. Mata brought in far more guile. At one stage they had Mata, Pogba, Martial, Rashford and Mason Greenwood all on the pitch together. And suddenly Watford looked very vulnerable. And there was a feeling going into the last quarter of an hour, if they conceded once, they might implode. But they managed to keep them out.
Okay, so there's room for Pogba in that team. Then the back page of The Guardian is Antonio Rudiger and race shame at Spurs. Referee halts game after Rudiger targeted from stands. I'll give you The Sun. We're sick of this. Racism hits Prem again. Rudiger accuses fan of monkey chant as stars unite to call out morons. You know, anyway. What a disaster, and it's obviously the picture of David De Gea. So.
Back at the Times London, Tottenham racism shame, game halted as Chelsea defender reports abuse, Sky disown Neville criticism of political leaders. And there's a mention on some of the back pages of the big story of the weekend, Ger, that non-Premier League related, non-racism related as well. That's obviously just dominating all of the headlines. But I'm sure you were all over the darts the weekend, Ger.
All over the darts, Dave, yeah.
Watching Fallon Shara continue to make history at the Ali Pali.
Yeah, fair play to her. She won again.
She won again.
What was the story about the Irish lad who couldn't count?
Yeah, he miscounted in, was it the final leg? It was definitely in the final.
Needed a double two, aimed at double one.
Yeah.
Not a great look.
He thought he was on 4.
All those hours and hours and hours of hard work, and all you've got to do is a bit of maths, and you're like, can't do it.
Yeah, well, it's a misjudgment as opposed to a miscount. Like nobody mistakes 4 for 2, but or vice versa. But it went. I'm not sure if it actually cost the match because I didn't see it, but I read about it, and it was a mistake that was making the headlines for all the wrong reasons.
They're the hardest working sports people in the world, aren't they?
I don't, and I'm sure our darts-loving listeners and viewers will not appreciate your sarky tone.
They're up there with the boxers, the cyclists, you know, the rowers. They're the hardest working sports people.
They put as much time into their craft as any rower or boxer, yes.
Do they put as much time in as the boxers and rowers?
They may not have put as much thought into their nutrition, their diet, their time away from the practice board. But in terms of actually honing their craft, they would spend as much time at the Ocky as Paul O'Donovan would on the boat, I would suggest.
Well, I mean, he's obviously also in the gym. There's like a part of getting into the boat.
Well, I did make that different. I did make that distinction.
Then it's not the same. Then it's not the same. Irish Daily Mirror this morning. Let's stop racism together. Chelsea skipper Azpilicueta reported racist abuse of Rudiger to the ref and calls on everyone to unite and defeat the scourge. And then they've also Flappy Christmas, which is probably the headline of the day. It's David De Gea flapping at the ball. Robertson, now English may take this cup seriously. Andy Robertson believes Liverpool's success in the Club World Cup will force English teams to take the competition more seriously. The game goes to extra time. Not exactly what Liverpool would have wanted.
No, obviously not. And there was a chance that their semi-final against Monterrey was going to go to extra time as well. I was speaking to Gavin yesterday on on News Talk before Off the Ball went live, and he was asking me about the prestige and the significance of winning the competition, and it's something we can maybe get into with Kenny, but the fact that they were winning for the first time is a huge deal for them, and it just keeps the momentum going. It's another trophy. It's
you
another
get a medal at the end of your career. Did you win the World Cup? I won the World Cup. You're telling your kids I won the World Cup. They're like not going, oh, well, was it, you know, the real one? Was it in Doha? Was everybody there? They're like, oh, you won the World Cup. Happy days. Like,
if it was my dad and he was telling me that, I probably would say, well, hang on, how many teams were in it?
Every team in the world, son. Every team in the world starts out at the start of the year with a chance of winning this.
Anyway, we can debate the prestige of the World Club Championship at another time. This is the Daily Telegraph, the last one I have. Racist storm. PFA calls for government inquire after Spurs launch investigation into alleged abuse of Chelsea's Rudiger. And Fab Fallon, Hollywood next for darts sensation. I haven't read the story inside, so I assume it's Tinseltown as opposed to the town in Northern Ireland that they're referring to.
Who knows?
But I'd have to read it to clarify.
It could be Hollywood County Down. Which is more likely, ultimately, in the long run? Is this story going to be...
Does one have two L's? Does Hollywood in LA have two L's? Hollywood in Northern Ireland only has one? Am I wrong?
I think you're wrong. I think...
So it could be the north of Ireland then?
It could be. But
we're not going to bother opening the paper to find out.
So, what's the tab of the morning? Oh, sorry, it's the headline of the day. I meant to say tab of the morning, sorry. For
which one did you go for?
Flappy Christmas. The Man United fans aren't going to be happy with that. Well, you know, there's most of the other headlines are about stuff that's a bit too serious. So, what's the last one here then? Got the Irish news for you? Yeah. Watford woe for Ole's United. We played like it was a testimonial, says Solskjaer. Carol Kane's been doing a good thing where he's been talking about the best 15 of each of the counties in Ulster in this millennium. It's been fairly controversial because, you know, the millennium is quite deep. The Tyrone team, for example, quite deep. Donegal team, quite deep. Like it's team of the decade is like fairly straightforward in most cases.
So team of the last 20 years for each county. Yeah. You're going to encounter a bit of controversy in that. Well, particularly the more successful counties.
Well, like that's their own team. Like even which of those 3 All-Ireland winning teams was the best? Because they all changed just subtly enough.
Yeah. Well, there was about 6 guys that would have won 3 medals. So there were huge differences between 03 and 08, for example. Like, is Peter Canavan in the team?
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously. What? He was there for 2 of them.
Yeah, well, he was there for 2 of them, but the second one...
He has a seminal role, even though he's injured, on 1 leg.
It was one of the greatest substitutions in sports history, wasn't it?
It is, yeah. So he gets in straight for that. Times UK? Yeah. So the end of year rugby awards in the Times UK, sorry, which I don't have here. Oh, do you have it?
Should I have it? Yeah.
Yeah. Owen Slot has picked his rugby team of the decade. How many Irish players do you think? You know, the decade of Joe Schmidt. How many does the London Times rugby correspondent give the Paddies?
Well, I know because you had said it to me.
You'd have like 4, wouldn't you? 4 of us, maybe?
Yeah. Just the one, Ger. Just the one. A certain Wexford tight head. Tyke Furlong makes it. Will I call out the team?
Yeah.
Israel Folau.
Right.
It's safe to say this is a team based purely on what happens on the pitch.
You can finish now. I've had enough. Honestly, I've had enough. Screw you. Right. The other thing that we wanted to talk about was Brian O'Connor's column in the back of the Irish Times, which I think you also have there, talking about Austin Gleeson not having any crack at Christmas this year because they're going to wire into the training.
Yeah, Austin saying that he's chosen not to enjoy Christmas. That he wants himself and Waterford to have a proper 10-month run into what they hope will be a vastly different championship campaign after 2 really poor years.
Does that mean you're not going on the piss properly? Is that what it is? It's not about like not enjoying yourself. It's like not tearing the arse out of it.
Yeah, I think like when it's quoted in the way it was, it sounds like a little bit of a soundbite. But any elite athlete, anybody taking their fitness very seriously and their conditioning very seriously, probably isn't going out on the lash and doing the 12 pubs in the build-up to Christmas Day. But is he not going to spend Christmas with his family? Will he not sit down and enjoy his Christmas dinner? Will he not maybe have a little bit of dessert, sit down and watch a movie, put the fire on? That sounds like a rather enjoyable Christmas to me. I don't know. There will be a lot of people who are not athletes of the renown of Austin Gleeson and other inter-county hurlers and footballers that will probably go for a run Christmas morning. Will probably be in the gym Christmas Eve and will be back in the gym on St. Stephen's Day because that's just what they do.
That'd be you, right?
Not necessarily, no.
Maybe though.
There's an outside chance, a couple of those days, maybe.
If you get 40 minutes on Christmas morning, would you be tempted?
I might do it. There may be a run Christmas morning.
Right.
Like just a trot.
On your own?
Well, who else is going to go with me? But loads of people will do that. And yeah, but they'll have a few drinks maybe Christmas afternoon. But I don't know if he's... I would say that Austin will enjoy his Christmas Day because he'll be there with family and friends, and that's what's most important.
Part of the issue, I think, with all of this is that there's still the culture of train. And we've been talking about this a good bit in the aftermath of Luke Keane's piece with us and then Philip Jordan's piece with us last week, where there's an inbuilt sense that unless you're training to the point of absolute sheer and utter exhaustion and your body is breaking, that you haven't done enough. And we know now that's just not right, that you don't need to kill yourself to get fully fit, that you can build up over a period of time and that short, sharp bursts are actually more beneficial for you for all sorts of reasons.
I've always looked at the number of players over the years that have not played in the league. Someone like Mike McCarthy, for example, the Kerry centre half-back, in their 2009 All-Ireland, am I right in saying?
Did he just come back? He came back after
he retired, essentially.
Yeah.
Came back in April or May and was one of the best players in Kerry's All-Ireland Championship winning team. And that he's one of many, many examples over the years where players have either stepped away or have been injured or have changed their mind on whether they wanted to be part of the inter-county setup and come back, and they certainly did not look any the worse for it, to tell me that you do not need to be training from October to June to be able to have a proper crack at the championship. We know that the training session to match ratio is unbelievably skewed in Gaelic games. And it is what is leading to the sort of chronic hip and knee problems that guys in their 20s are having, that it will see in 20 years' time, 25 years' time, a huge number, disproportionate from the general population of guys who would have played in this particular era, having hip replacements, knee replacements in their 50s.
But they're having them in their 30s. Like there's a senior inter-county footballer who played at the very highest level, who was one of the best footballers in the country, who had a hip replacement last week in his 30s. And there are several of those. There shouldn't really be that. Obviously, there are going to be some who end up at the end of a career having an injury that causes it or having been predisposed to an underlying condition. And but there's just too many of them.
Yeah, like I don't know the figures now, and I don't want to speculate, but I think it'll certainly become... These players are probably the guinea pigs, and we will have more information as the years go on. But I think something drastic needs to be done, where there needs to be a ban on... The inter-county season needs to be completely turned on its head, and I don't think players should be with their county for more than 5 or 6 months of the year, max. Nowadays, it's a 10-month gig.
The NFL season is great because it's so short. It happens, there's a 5-month burst and it's over. And it's actually a 4-month burst, really, because most of the teams are gone at that stage. And the last month...
Yeah, but they're training in March, aren't they?
Well, no. They all are. There's organised team activities of about 3 or 4 days, and then they go away, and then there's a week, and then they go away, and then there's another pre-season, and then it starts. But like most of the time, and when they are there, they're severely limited to like 2 hours on field in full pads, 2 hours on field, no pads. Like every single minute is prescribed about what you can and can't do. So then it comes down to the individual to actually look after themselves away from the game, which is, personal responsibility.
They are being paid millions of dollars.
Very good system,
well.
But the money is kind of an irrelevancy. Like in terms of everybody agreeing that we're going to do this amount and no more, because it actually lessens the possibility of us playing because we're going to get injured training instead of actually...
Yeah, no, that's the point I'm trying to make, in that I think that every team should have a parameter in which they can train. And if you break those parameters, there's a serious
Massive
punishment for
yeah,
it.
you get fecked
So
out
if
for
there's
a
any
year.
sly trips away, sightseeing trips, cultural enlightenment trips that some counties might be taking, if there are more sessions than are permitted, the GA comes down on those counties like a ton of bricks. And everybody then is playing off the same level, and also it probably helps cancel out some of the geographical issues that certain counties have to deal with. So Mayo, for example, Donegal, Kerry, the teams that have several players in their squad that have to travel from Dublin on a Tuesday night and get back for work Wednesday morning, they may not have to do that as often. Less time in the car, less time on the training pitch, not worrying about what counties like Dublin or Meath, for example, Kildare, are able to achieve in your absence from the training field because they're actually living and training closer to their workplace.
Right. 10 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTBAM, the Sports Breakfast Show from Off the Ball. Live from 7:30 every morning. Best place to watch us is youtube.com/Off the Ball. You can subscribe there. The best place to listen is the Go Loud app. Just click the icon at the bottom of the app and select OTB Sports Radio. That's our 24-hour sports radio station. Football next this morning. We're back after these.